But one of the most important parts of this convocation is the town hall. And it's something entirely different. I hope you all notice and are feeling that a new day has come to Sacramento City College. When I started here 10 years ago, I didn't have a clue, quite frankly, if I was at the right place. And I trusted that I would find out soon enough. But it's taken me a while to find my place, not only in the classroom, but more particularly within this organization. And for me, and for the students I get up for every single day, this week, yesterday and today, are confirmation and affirmation that Sacramento City College is really poised to be a leader in higher education, particularly for students of color. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm a Tony Newman recruit. My name is Dr. Deborah Crumpton, and I have the privilege of serving here as a classroom instructor. I'm also one of 5 equity coordinators, and I'm the coordinator for the new Faculty Academy. Now, at this point, I was going to invite panelists up. We're going to have panelists in a minute, but they needed to go and take care of some, personal hygiene things. So while they're doing their personal hygiene things, and we're good with that, yeah. There are some important announcements and welcoming remarks I want to make. I first want to welcome our Chancellor. Chancellor King, it is wherever, I'm just so glad to see you here wearing the right colors. But more importantly than that, I have to say a personal thank you to you on behalf of our president. I know it's great risk to be a president at any college, and certainly at a community college. And our president is relatively new here. And I believe, and I have seen, his willingness to push against some pre-imposed, perhaps, expectations. And to be willing to step out there in some uncharted places like he is today and was yesterday. And I know he was able to do that, Chancellor King, because you have his back. Thank you. Thank you. And you should know that we will not let him fall on any broken glass. We've got his back. To Trustee Haynes, thank you so much for being here. I hope you can spend the day with us as Chancellor King is as well. Thank you for being here. I understand that we have some visitors from the other colleges trying to figure out what's happening at Sacramento City College. As you eat your hearts out today, you can go back and tell your colleges, listen, we're all in this together. Don't go out there and try to create this starting anew. Let's get together. Let's get some lessons learned. Let's create some synergy. Let's change this region for our students. So welcome. We've got people, the staff, this college is on what we are calling today a skeleton kind of staffing. But we know that we have students who have somehow got a message, I'm told, from someplace at district that affected their anxiety level. We have some students who got a message, I'm told, that their BOG waiver or something has been revoked and, they might be dropping classes. I know that district is fixing that as I speak. See, already fixed. So we have counselors over there working with students and all of that. But for the most part, the entire college community is here. Well, where is here? Well, right here in this auditorium. Those who cannot fit in this auditorium or have chosen not to be seated here or in 106, they too have an audio and video feed. For the overflow from that room, we have people in 201 and 202 upstairs. They too have an audio and video feed. West Sacramento Center and the Davis Center are present with us. And I want to say, and they have an audio and video feed. Welcome to the entire Sacramento City College community. Welcome to the new way of starting our semester. So let me tell you what's going to happen in this town hall. It's a new experience, and it's all about you on behalf of our students. So I don't want you to get it twisted, right? It's all about you on behalf of our students. It's occurred to all of us, and when I say us, I'm talking about the Division of Equity and Student Success. And I should tell you that we have a fearless leader. I don't know if Dr. Molly Springer is in the room, but Dr. Molly Springer, I want to give a shout out to you. You know, you empower us as equity coordinators, myself, Riyadh, Jerry, Donna, and Adam, to go out and do what we believe, to do the work regardless of resources and all of that. Thank you for your support. So, this town hall is for you. It's for you to answer, all of you, to answer any questions, to ask any questions, to voice any concerns, to further explore things that you may have seen or things that are troubling to you. This is for your benefit. And so we want to focus our attention particularly on where we know the boats are leaking, and some are on fire, and that's for our brown and black students. And perhaps you've had questions that came out of yesterday's sessions, or maybe some of the work we've been doing on this campus, or maybe just what's been happening in the community. And so as you came in, you were given either a sheet of paper or a 3x5 card. You were asked, I hope, if you had something to write with. And we want you to use those cards that you were given to write whatever questions or concerns you have. If there's a question or concern you would like to be directed to one of the panelists, please write their name on that. And then once your question is written, and you should be writing them now, right? As they're coming to your mind, you should be writing them now. Right? We ask you to hold that up and pass that to one of the aisles. And people who we lovingly refer to right now as runners will be looking for those hands, and they will bring the questions to the equity coordinators. So the equity coordinators are sitting on the side of the auditorium here, and they're just going to scan your questions, not to flush them out, not to decide which ones not to ask, right? But to identify those that are duplicates. And then they'll be presented to me, and I will present them to our panelists. Does anybody have any questions kind of about how that flow is? Okay, so, I've been kind of warned that some of you all are going to make your voices heard in other ways. And I know that's not going to happen. I know that nobody's going to just stand up here and shout stuff out. I already know that. You see, I have, just like I go into my classroom, I say to my students, listen, any of y'all packing? And I said, I'm just asking, because I'm like the flight attendant on the Southwest flight I got on. She said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you the emergency evacuation procedures. But quite frankly, if I thought this plane was going to go down today, I would have called in sick. So listen, if any of y'all came in here packing, and you know what I mean, you see, how you come to something is how you get fed by the event you've come to. Some of you came in here already full, and so you have left no room for any kind of food to go in, right? So you can just unpack right now, right? Because this is a safe place. This is a safe place. All questions, all concerns are welcome. And this should be the opportunity for us to clear the air. Because really, when we walk out of here, it really is a new day. We're going to show up differently. We're not going to be the same. Because the only thing you can do when you leave here today is decide not to do. And so I want you to just take a few minutes to write your questions. I'm looking for my panelists, and as they are coming up here right now to be seated, I'm going to allow you to start to write your questions. Come on up here, panelists, and start to write your questions as I get ready to introduce them. So I will make sure I have everybody back here, and let's see. Just sit wherever you want. They're going to adjust the microphones and make sure everybody's good. Just sit wherever you want to sit. All right, I think everybody's here. Don't they look good? Give them a hand, y'all. Oh. You know, it's been incredible work on the part of our audio visual IT folks. I mean, it's kind of, we got technology everywhere. And thank you. Thank you. All right, so while they're doing that, let me introduce our panel because I want to have maximum time. And I promise you'll be out of here no later than 11:30. I'm going to do some truncated introductions in the interest of time. You can find fuller bios of each one of these individuals on our professional development website. Dr. Margarita Berta Avila is a social science professor at California State University, Sacramento, located here in Sacramento. Her academic focus is international and multicultural education with an emphasis on second language acquisition. Ms. Nsinga Dugas is a program manager of African American Female Excellence. When she was at the University of California, Berkeley, Nsinga served as one of the directors in the Multicultural Student Development Office in the area of African American student development. Our own returning back home, Dr. Lisa Gunderson is a registered clinical counselor in Canada and a licensed psychologist here in the state of California. I probably need some therapy, Lisa, so I might come and see you. Her research and the majority of her clinical work concerns minoritized young adults. Our own beloved president, Michael Gutierrez. Before being selected for his rightful place right here at Sacramento City College, held a variety of roles in the Texas system of higher education. He is still healing from them. Oh, Dr. Khalid White, an award-winning educator, author, and professor of ethnic studies, African American studies at San Jose City College. And Dr. Luke Wood, who brought us Real Talk this morning. I don't know that any more really needs to be said, but I will remind you that he's the Associate Vice President for Faculty Diversion and Inclusion and a Distinguished Professor of Education at San Diego University. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome our esteemed panel. All right. Well, I have so I'm going to be using my phone, not to do texting, but some of the questions have come to me. So as a reminder, if you have questions, please pass them to the aisle, and the runners will come and get your questions wherever you are, in all those rooms you're in. All you just forward your questions, and they will come to me. All right, how are you all feeling this morning?
Blessed.
Blessed?
Yes.
Okay, some of y'all don't look really happy. Khalid, you good? Did you get breakfast? You got some breakfast?
Yes, I did.
Okay, all right. And then Nsinga, you good?
I'm wonderful.
All right, Margarita, what about you?
I'm here. I'm ready.
All right, and I already talked to the president, right? Yep, I know he's good. And Lisa, you good?
I'm so good.
All right, so listen. This is a burning question I've had. It's come several ways yesterday. I would like to know, really from each one of you, I would like each one of you to respond to this question. What would be your response to educators who say, you know, this whole equity thing, I interpret it as a call to lowering expectations? What would be your response to those educators? You can start with anybody. But it has to start with somebody.
Call to lower expectations.
I'm sorry, I'll go. I would just say that the work itself is never about lowering expectations or lowering rigor, but redefining what it means for us to have higher expectations of ourselves. When we work with our students, oftentimes we will challenge them, but we don't necessarily provide them with the other elements that they need for success. So we think that success is a combination of 4 different things. First is challenge, so pushing students to their highest level that they can learn within their zone of proximal development. So giving them information, concepts, and theories that are going to push them to that next level, and then providing them with support. We like to think about support as the availability of support. So, coming to class a little bit early, leaving class a little bit late, not the other way around. Also, we want to make sure that they know that they can come to our office hours and those types of things. So we want to challenge them and we want to support them. That's the theory from Navit Sanford, and the idea is that you want to have an optimal balance between the two, because if you challenge a student too much without any support, then they'll feel very dismayed. And if you provide too much support and too little challenge, then they'll feel coddled and they won't grow, learn, and develop. But that theory, like most theories, doesn't totally work when we're talking about our most underserved students, because if you can challenge a student all you want, but if they don't believe that you believe in their ability to succeed, then the challenge will go unmet. Said differently, no one has ever risen to low expectations. And you can provide support all you want, but if the student doesn't believe that you personally care about them and care about their success, then that support will go unused. And so it's and what oftentimes people say, well, what does that mean, that care about them? Well, it really refers to a concept called authentic care, where students know that we have a vested interest in them, so that if they do well, if they succeed, if they hit the mark, then we're going to personally feel like we did well. And similarly, if they stumble, if they fall, if they miss the mark, that we are going to personally feel like we missed the mark. So it's really a combination of challenge, support, high expectations, and authentic care. And nowhere in that mix did it ever mention lowering expectations or lowering standards.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
I'd like to go, and I just want to make a correction, Deborah, to my title. It's actually director for the first only initiative for African American female excellence in a school district in the United States.
Thank you. Thank
And
you.
I only say that because I'm seated in Oakland Unified School District, so when we talk about low expectations,
Yeah.
that becomes really important. And I guess as a social scientist, the first thing that comes for me with that question is, where's the root of that question?
Yeah.
And I would want to first talk to the person about, where does that come from and why do you believe that? Because often what we do is then we take that question and then we assess our students from that frame. And I would want to reframe that from the conversation with that person, because as a person of African ancestry, where my roots of my people are the South, so it is slavery. Nowhere in my parents' thinking and spirit and expectations was I to do less than excellent. How many of that is true? How much of that is true for you all? Let me just see a show of hands. Because we don't know that about each other. So my parents didn't have access to college. I'm one of a total of 10 children. And we were expected to do excellent wherever we were. Whether we were the custodian or we were a president of a college or a university. That was the expectation. So it's important to really understand when we say lowering expectations, where's the root of that? Because I'm also an adjunct and I have been that for about 12 years. Nowhere in my experience have any of my colleagues had low expectations of your student. You gotta think about this like parenting. We don't have low expectations of our children, right? So when we go in as professors, our responsibility is to look at each of our students, look at where they are and look at where we can take them. And each one of us must do that for each student that we encounter. So when I look at my students in PhD programs, I know where they started and I know what I hope for them. And almost all of them are in some place where they're exhibiting excellence. And so it's important for us to examine the root of that. The other thing I was telling a faculty member yesterday, and we don't like to do this, I don't like to do this because I like the work, is that when we're talking about expectations and requirements, you gotta sit on those committees. You gotta sit on those faculty committees, you gotta be in that academic senate, you gotta use your voice, because if you've been teaching for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, you have a clear understanding of how to move the student from point A to point B. And so one of the things we have to do is reframe our language, because I was listening deeply to you, Dr. Luke, is that When you change your language, that's the first part of the beginning process of changing your mindset. So I've been telling people, stop using minority. Folks of color are not a minority. If you have a global mindset, we're not a minority. Stop using the terms low expectations, because that doesn't come from a place that's rooted in excellence and education for our young folks. You have to change your language, because that's the first process for changing your mindset.
Thank you.
So I'd like to, yes. So I wanted to make a correction as well to my introduction. I'm actually a professor of education in the College of Education, and I prepare students who want to be high school teachers. And I taught myself as well, K through high school, in bilingual classrooms. And so I wanted to state that because that is actually, unfortunately, a question that I get from the students that I'm about to prepare, that the majority are female and the majority are white, right? And so they, especially in the Sacramento area or in the area of California, do not reflect the body population that they will be teaching, right? So one of the most important things that has to be done before even teaching methods, before even teaching best practices, is exactly what Dr. Lookwood was discussing, was beginning to flip that mirror, or begin a process of flipping that mirror and beginning to analyze or continue to analyze their own dispositions, right? Where did those dispositions come from, and how are those dispositions perpetuated? And how are those dispositions perpetuated not only at a micro level, which is their school and their classroom, but also at a macro level from a larger societal construct that is continuously socializing our communities to believe exactly and form exactly a question like that was just posed, which is this equity or issues of equity is going to lower expectations. I think that one of the hardest things for teachers to do, or individuals who ask that question, is posed by my colleague as well, which is, where is that rooted from? Right? So, and oftentimes what happens, especially with teachers out in the classrooms or institutions, is that we separate the intrinsic or systemic structures from the individual in order to justify those types of questions, in order to justify why we are allowing to continue for a system to do exactly what it's set up to do, right? Duncan Andrade, professor out in San Francisco State, says the students that are failing are being set up to fail. That's exactly what they're being set up to do, right? So we have to question that. But we can counter. We can counter by making that connection and from a macro and micro context. How is it that these are linked? And then begin to start thinking about some of the work that's coming out by Dr. I wrote his name here real quickly. Dr. Medina, who comes from an indigenous pedagogical frame that's saying our students have a sacred purpose, right? So that's from the onset. So as you're standing at your door, whether you teach at a university, I myself teach at Sacramento State, and as my students are walking through the door, every time that I have class with them, I'm standing by that door saying, hey, how are you doing? How's it going, right? But as they're walking through that door, in my frame, and this is what Dr. Medina talks about, he's saying that individual, that student has a sacred purpose. We might not know what that purpose is, that's right, but we're there to help foster and develop. Not to say that we have the answer, and definitely not colluding with savior mentality, right? But that they have the purpose that they are going to develop. But from that purpose, there has to be belief, right? There has to be intrinsic belief that there is that purpose. And once that is done simultaneously, the work of Luis Rodriguez talks about then, there's no way that you cannot have intentional excellence of your students. How can you believe in a sacred purpose of your students without having intentional excellence, right? And so that is, and with that intentional excellence comes the high expectations, comes the rigor, and it's not either or. Yes. And why do we feel like having an authentic care, as shared earlier, for our students means you're compromising rigor or compromising high academic achievement that you know your students can have. So I just wanted to leave it there for right now.
Wow, thank you. Does anyone have anything they want to add?
Sure. And I'll come from the side of what happened this past fall semester here at Sacramento City College. And we had a student forum, we had an open mic sponsored by the Student Senate, we had a student protest, and we heard a lot of things, but I'm going to focus on just a couple of the things. And one of the hardest things I've ever had to hear in my professional career, and I think it was hard for all of us, is to hear students say that they don't feel welcomed here. They don't feel safe here. They don't want to return next semester. Because we've spent our entire careers actually trying to do the exact opposite, right? To try to get our students to fulfill their goals. And when you pare down a lot of the messaging that our students were telling us, is they wanted to be treated like people. They wanted to be treated like humans. And so if we make some commitments, and Luke talked about this in his presentation, if we commit in the classroom to learn all our students' names by the end of the first week, and if we have them go to our office hours so that it humanizes, we not only know their names, but they feel comfortable, because not enough just to have an open door policy. Our students have to know that it's open for them to feel comfortable. And if we make those commitments, and in student services and in the business office, if we commit that every time we see a person, we ask what their name is, because there's nothing more beautiful sounding than our own names. And so if we commit to doing those things, that I've not said anything about lowering standards. It's about that connection with people.
Thank you. Khalid, did you want to offer something?
I don't know if this is one.
Speaking to it.
Okay.
Speaking to it, we have great people here. They got it right. They got it right.
I would suggest that the idea of lowering expectations, first and foremost, is deficit-minded thinking, right? It's negative thinking. So that's the first point I would make. The second point I would make in terms of this idea of equity and social justice and inclusion is that these are the tools that are needed in California public education. California public education, we, as was stated in the presentation, particularly in the community college, we lead the pack, right? We move the needle. And so the rest of the nation, as Dr. Wood pointed out, is watching us. So with public education and with these implementing equity and making our classrooms and campuses more equitable, we have the opportunity to really put public education nationwide on a much greater path and on a much more effective path. So we can stop reading all these articles about how these groups and that group and this population and that population is continuing to fail. Well, let's put the action in and put the work in towards firstly changing the way we think, and then changing our practices by including these steps towards equity, inclusion, social justice, et cetera.
Got it. Good. Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm going to frame my answer in terms of some of the work I do in Canada right now. And one of my roles is I'm the Associate Director for the Masters of Counseling program with City University Seattle. We have Canadian campuses. And as part of my file, I teach the master's students in the areas of diversity. And I also am in charge of practicum coordination. And separate from that, 2 days a week, I work at the tribal school, which is an indigenous school, and all of our kids live on reserve. And the reason that I mention that, we go pre-K through about grade 10, and we have a Sanchothan immersion stream. So we're one of the only schools in the province that actually is engaged in revitalization of language. And part of that, that's really cool. And part of that is one of the reasons I think I get along so well with our esteemed principal is when I came on board, she didn't have to explain to me the inherent beauty, intelligence, and creativity of the young people that we serve who are all Indigenous. She understood with my history that I know what it's like to have people look at you and not believe that you have the ability or come from families and cultures that encourage academic excellence at all time, and how tiring and exhausting it can become to try to convince other people that you work with in that inherent fundamental fact. So when I think about this idea of people coming and talking about lowering expectations, I think oftentimes in this work we can get caught up in answering questions that are the wrong question. And so what I would suggest to that person is just kind of reflecting back, as somebody said, what is really the fundamental question that the person is really asking? And what are the expectations of their students, period? You know, what are their expectations? And why do they feel that that expectation shifts depending on the demographic shift in their classroom?
Yeah.
And I think that is the real conversation that needs to happen. I'm going to leave it there because I know our time. Go for it.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. When I hear someone say that, I say, so that means they're probably looking at me and saying, Deborah, how the hell did you get here?
Right.
I mean, that's how I internalize it. And so it was an important question for each one of you to respond to. In the interest of time and trying to get as many questions as we can, I'm going to kind of selectively ask one or two of you to respond to some questions. But if you feel an urgent need to really say something, please do that. So to the audience, we have a ton of questions now. I knew we would. I knew we would. And obviously, we won't get to every question, but here's my promise. We will answer every single question that comes to us within the next 4 weeks. So if you don't hear your question being asked, and we will publicly answer those questions. You know, they're paying me more money to do this, so I'm really into it. All right. Margarita, I'd like for you to first take this next question. I sometimes can't move beyond the feeling of feeling blamed as an instructor for these inequities. Mm-hmm. The implication is that I'm a racist. Why should I engage if people are just going to blame me for all of this?
That's good.
Okay. That's a really good question. And actually, I think of my students that are going to be teachers, a majority, like I said, white teachers. And the course that I teach at Sacramento State is the social justice course. So we address immediately their biases, implicit biases, and frame it in the context of anti-racism, or the work that we want to do in the context of anti-racism, social justice. And to do so, we have to confront our own internalized racism, sexism, biases, etc. And often an act of grappling that the student teachers that I work with do is deflect, right? And their deflection is that response, right? Why am I being blamed for this, and why should I participate if I'm going to be blamed for this? And how I respond to the students is in this way. What is it at the core of what we are discussing that is hurting you right now? Don't be reactionary with me. Get to the core of that pain, of feeling blamed, that you are at fault. And I am honest with my students and say, you do have a choice to make here, though, right? So the blame is not necessarily centered on you as a teacher, Dr. So-and-so, so-and-so, or Miss or Mr., or however you choose to identify, right? But there is a historical, systemic context. And if you do not understand that historical systemic context of how schools have been used to perpetuate inequities consciously, then you will become a pawn of that school system that perpetuates the inequities that happen at a larger level. So the process is to understand that historical context and how has it played out now in contemporary times. Not much different, just more technology, okay? And then from there, right, how will you interrupt it? How are you going to interrupt it? And that's your choice. You're either going to say, why are you blaming me? This and that, etc. Or you're going to say, okay, I understand the historical context. My ancestors were involved with oppression and genocide. This is how it has systemically rolled out, but I can interrupt it and stand, and I'm sorry, I'm being careful with my language, and be alongside in solidarity. So that's something to think about.
Thank you. Dr. Wood, I'd like you to respond to this next question. What are your thoughts on the role of classified staff in this work? And how best to really, this person says, really support staff who are on the front line, who are often on the front lines of contact with students, but who may not be supported or empowered structurally to participate fully in professional development efforts? And before you answer that, I got to give a shout out to our president again, right? Because you're in here right now. Classified staff is in here. And, you know, to our vice presidents and our associate vice presidents and our deans and supervisors, you got to keep making this happen. You got to keep making this happen. You cannot go back, and you will be held accountable for making this happen. Now, Dr. Boyd, could you please respond to that question too?
Yeah. Well, actually, what you just said. So the campuses that we've seen that have been the most successful have been very intentional about not making this a full-time faculty conversation. Full-time faculty are absolutely essential. They have structured in-class engagement with students. But in reality, it's our part-time faculty, it's our classified staff, it's counseling faculty, it's administration. It's anybody who works at this institution is responsible for student success, including the custodial staff. So the institutions that we've seen that have been the most effective have developed training infrastructures that ensure that everyone has access to be able to have these kinds of conversations with support. And that includes having set alone sessions, because oftentimes these sessions end up being dominated by conversations about faculty and faculty issues and teaching issues. And it's like the folks who are really the front line and front door are oftentimes left out of those conversations. And so, on many campuses, if we think about just matriculation, a student's going to engage sometimes 8, 9 people before they'll ever go into the classroom. And oftentimes then they get into the classroom and their experience at the institution's already been framed. Mm-hmm. Sometimes in very good ways, but also sometimes in very bad ways as well. And so I think it's absolutely essential that we do that. And part of it is because when we think about our community college students, oftentimes we have the kind of bimodal distribution. We have a lot of students who've delayed their enrollment. And they went into the military, went to the workforce, and a whole host of other things that they could do. And then they come back to a college, and they're concerned, they've been out of the classroom, maybe they didn't have a good experience in education, and so now they have to go through this process of matriculation, and they're concerned about whether or not they even belong. And oftentimes the messages that they receive throughout that process only further reinforce that they don't. So for example, if I'm concerned about my academic abilities and the first thing I do is go and take an assessment test that tells me I'm not good enough. That's right. Think about the message that that receives. If I think about my financial aid staff and recognizing that on the research that we do, we oftentimes say that library staff and the financial aid staff, that those two places, the library and financial aid, are microaggression central. Because that's where most of the big challenges occur. I'm not saying that occurs here. I'm just saying, I haven't collected data here. But I'm saying that on most of the campuses that we work with, that's what we see. So I think it's absolutely essential that they are part of it. And not just part of it, but front and center, and that it's intentional, and that managers see it as a priority to their success in their areas.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. So, Nsinga and Lisa, I'd like to direct this next question to the two of you. If you can offer, how do you bring culturally relevant pedagogy to a class like math? Now think hard on this. Yeah. We need this. We got. Everybody take a moment of silence, prayer, right? Because these math and English are gatekeeper courses for our students, right? And when they hear math and they hear English, they're like on the way out the damn door. So, I'm sprinkling sprinkle dust on you, angel dust.
I love this question because, interestingly, when you look at research just in terms of United States and Canada, one of the things you see is that we have this attitude that math is something that you're either born with or without. So you'll hear people say, I just don't have the math gene, or, don't worry about that, baby, I couldn't do math either. And you see that we are losing wonderful, wonderful opportunities for young people who would be engaged in math because of stuff that happens from the very beginning. And the reason I'm mentioning that is when you get somebody now here at the community college thinking about math, you are dealing with somebody who has likely had not very good experiences with math from the very, very beginning. And that's really different than some of the philosophy outside of the Western world around what math is about, that everybody fundamentally has the ability to do math, and it's our ways of the way that we teach it that we need to think about that. And so my two young sons were engaged in a Montessori method throughout their elementary school, thank goodness. And part of that, in terms of how they learned math, was through manipulatives and things like that as opposed to worksheets. And when you begin to think about this, we're now doing the same sort of thing at the tribal school where I work, where you're taking ideas that are culturally relevant, different types of story, different types of manipulatives that have actual cultural relevancy. And now all of a sudden, if I'm engaging in some abstract math concept, it's not abstract anymore. And so I would say to our teachers a couple of things. First and foremost, if you have a kind of a math quiz or something you do the first time in school, I would actually substitute out one of those and ask students to come prepared with one racialized mathematician into the classroom. In other words, do a project, one-page paper. Go out there and find me some racialized mathematicians and bring back what they've done. You see what I'm doing? I'm putting math in its proper social, political, cultural context. It's not just these numbers. And oftentimes, we don't see ourselves reflected in mathematics. And we asked questions, asked the math department, and this happened already, who is the first Black mathematician? Tell me about Black mathematicians in the United States, and make that part of your curriculum. Oftentimes we think of math, we don't think about, oh no, that's English or literature or something like that. No, it's not, it's mathematics. And people need to see themselves reflected in that manner. Second of all, I would start math by acknowledging the realities. I don't start any class at the beginning of the term with come on in, here's my syllabus, okay, let's go through it. They don't even see the syllabus for the first 20 minutes of the beginning of my class. I start talking story. They walk in and I'm like, welcome. We all know that people think math sucks. Maybe you think so too. I know that. And start talking about the realities of the fears that you know that are sitting there in the classroom. And this is why in this room, you're going to have a different math experience than you may have ever had in your life. And together, we're going to work on how to make that happen. And I can talk a little bit more about that later, but there are ways to engage your students in helping to create your class together, because they're bringing in their lived experiences, you're bringing in your content knowledge, and together your classroom experience for the term becomes your classroom experience and not my experience. I'm going to just give this to you. So you need to know, what are your fears of math? Pass out a sheet of paper at the beginning of the term. We're doing a quiz. I want you to tell me what you think about math. What is the thing you're most afraid of? What are the concepts or whatever? And gather that information and have that inform what you're going to be doing. And then seek out creative ways to engage in cultural pedagogy. It exists and it's out there. I promise you. That's all I'm going to say right now, because I know there's somebody else there.
And Singer, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Oh, Dr. Deborah, I have so much I want to say. Let me try to concretize some of this. Let me start with a personal story. So very, very early in my career, almost 30 years ago, I had the opportunity to be an assistant math teacher. And one of the tasks that I was given, because I love math, I don't like every math, and that's one of the fallacies that we have, that when you go into math, you have favorites. I'm not a fan of geometry, but I love algebra. And then really understanding, so the lead teacher said, I need to divide the classroom. And this was very tricky for me because I didn't really have a context of racism, because both my parents, who are from the South, really didn't want us to have to experience the things that they experienced. So their methodology for my 9 brothers and sisters was to not talk about any of that and to see us for the moment that we were born in. And so I'm in this math class, and the instructor says, Nzinga, I need you to take some of the slow learners out of the class, which it felt a certain way, but I didn't really understand why it felt a certain way, right? Because when you're young and you're just wanting to do, your mind is not trying to understand that, but your heart, your feeling, your intuition is saying something is wrong. And just a little note, children know when something is wrong. Absolutely. Students know when they don't like you. And they know when you don't like them. Because usually that's where it starts. They get a feeling, and then they, in their mind, the instructor doesn't like me, so I don't like them. That's right. So in class, so I said, okay. I thought that was a challenge. So they said, and it was very interesting, my population was Black, brown, Asian, and low-income whites. And I need you to take them, and you just work with them while I work with the students who are where they should be or advanced. So she set me in another classroom. I started working, and I started to see that those students didn't learn math in a linear way. Exactly. That they had different learning modalities. Some were visual, some were auditory, some needed manipulatives or tactiles, that's when you touch. And so I just started making my classroom very much how they learn. So it looked very chaotic, but it was organized chaos because I had them in different pods. And then I had them rotate out of those pods so that they could see different learning modalities. So then we were rolling, and I was like, okay, I'm doing good, I'm doing good. We were rolling so much that we actually went past her class. And so in my naivete, I said, well, I think they're ready to come back in the class. So they came back in the class, and I said, let me show you what they've been doing, right? I'm like all fancy. Let me show you what they've been doing. When we got in the class, and they were showing what they were learning, and then the other students start to feel some of what they were learning, I looked over to my lead instructor, and she had a look on her face, and her hands were like this. So I knew something was wrong, and so I'm the type of personality, I want to do it right the first time, because I don't like to get in trouble. And so I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't understand what was wrong. So later in our debriefing session, she said, you didn't do the task that I told you to do. She said, I actually told you to work with them, and they were supposed to stay there throughout the semester, not come back in the class and be further advanced. That was my first understanding of needing to shift a classroom and preconceived notions that teachers have about our students. So in that experience, I say about math is when you're teaching math or any subject for that matter, you have to have a historical frame of reference from where you're teaching. So if you're teaching history, which I said in the workshop, we are learning revised history. So what we're learning is incomplete history, and only the history that serves to keep the system that it was maintained to keep. You got to think that way about math. So when you go in, everything you get from math or any other subject, you probably have to start all over. So I asked the question yesterday in my workshop, who was the first African mathematician? Most people can answer that question. Most of us can't answer that question. So I said it. I said, who was the first scientist and mathematician? Imhotep. I see a blank look on your face. Because Imhotep is from Kemet, which you understand is Egypt, but if humanity began in Africa, that's where the first thinkers are. And we're afraid to go back. Further, I said, guess what? Everybody in here is African.
Uh-oh. Did you say that, Nsinga?
Everybody in here is African, because if the birthplace of humanity is Africa, then we are African. We just moved to other places, and then hair texture and color and all that changed for climatic conditions. But when we say that, we know because of the society we live in, we're going to do a racial diagnosis of me saying we're all from Africa. That's what we have to look at. So when you say, how do you put culturally relevant practices in the classroom, you got to start in elementary school. Because if you don't get certain math and English concepts by the 3rd grade, you're going to be behind. If you don't understand that math is tied to critical thinking, it's tied to English, you'll separate and compartmentalize math when they need to be building blocks. So if my children, which most black and brown children get behind at the 3rd grade, if they're not reading well, they're not going to do math well. So in your classroom, it first becomes visual. So you got to put visual representations of math. And then you got to make math connect to what they do. You got to bring your stories. So my story will be, my mother never let me measure anything when I was cooking. Anybody have that? I try to get the measuring cup. Baby, put that down. You got to be able to measure a quarter in your hand. You got to know what a pinch is. You got to be able to eye what a half a cup is. Because guess what? We didn't have those tools and implements in my grandmother's house. So you got to know that. So you got to make math real to them. You got to take them to math and don't call it math, call it life, because math is everywhere. That's culturally relevant. Right? If you let me talk to the women and maybe some of the brothers and maybe some of the theys. When you want something, tennis shoes, skirt, I don't know, new do. You know how to calculate 30% off, don't you?
Yeah.
Right? You know how, let me see my budget and let me see how to do this. Put that in real life. My 1st grade in statistics was a D. By the time I got to graduate school, it was an A. Because my professor said, here's how we're going to do research methods. And he said, then you're going to go out and study this in your community. Yeah. That made it relevant for me and important because my work was now situated in my community. Make math real. Math is real. You got to look at data. I was looking at the numbers of people in here when I came in here. Math is a real and living thing because we know this. And so why don't our students know this, right? As a math teacher, if you look at your class and your class looks like this, that means you're probably not teaching your class, so you got to shift. That's culturally relevant, that I understand that my students are not picking it up, so I got to shift. So as it was stated earlier, we're not taught to be teachers. So they're learning as you're learning. So humble yourself, because if you're a real teacher, real talk, your students not learning, you don't want that to be a reflection of yourself.
That's on you.
Thank you so much for that.
That is on you.
Khalid, I would like for you to answer this question, please. So a young black man had pants falling off his butt. I asked him to pull his pants up. I imposed an instant dress code. Tell me, right or wrong?
Are you his mama?
Well, I'm just reading the question. Some theatrical performance.
Well,
That's broken glass, by the way.
I would say, personally, that the imposing an instant dress code, or I don't think that's going to go over too well. I don't think that's the right method or right tactic. First,
Go ahead. No, go ahead. What about, I'm just the pulling up of the pants. You think?
in public, to tell a person to pull their pants up in the classroom, like, "Hey, John, put your pants up now."
Yeah, I don't know. You know, it doesn't say that.
Okay.
It
Well,
was in a classroom. Probably.
I think that. Well, let me take a step back. I think that we want to teach young men and young women respect, self-respect, and part of that is going to be assessed by the way that they look. However, I think that's also what they call a teachable moment for us to be able to talk in private with a young person about what expectations you may have of them.
So do you think? I mean, I sense that this person might be looking for just. I think the
A yes
person
or
shouldn't be
no?
throwing their underwear, right? So should I just tell them to pull the pants up? Would you say to that instructor that's an appropriate opportunity to educate somebody on that they should be saying that to that student?
And the way that the question is phrased, no, I don't.
Would any of you tell your students just kind of a yes or no because that they should he or she he should pull his pants up to stop showing the underwear? Would any of you do that?
It depends. I do. It depends
You
on
do?
the
It
context.
depends?
If you have a relationship or rapport with that
A
student,
relationship or
it-
rapport.
I was gonna say.
then
Yeah.
then you can start to say, well, hey, pull the pants up,
yeah.
And I would really take that person in private and say that outside of class, outside of
class.
outside of a context where it's
Once you
gonna
had a
look like-
relationship with this person.
that helps.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay.
And not to publicly critique somebody because that's always going to end up in a back and forth clash. That's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah. So Lisa, I see you pregnant with it. Go ahead. You're gonna explode if you don't let it out. All over this stage, it's gonna be ugly.
The reason that I'm laughing is because I have 2 sons, and we have this interesting conversation around there. And I have Jamaican parents, and if you know anything about that, but no, directly to that question, no, you don't do that. The relationship, I'm saying, I would have a conversation about clothing with my students in general, not in terms of a critique or you need to pull your pants up, but what are you trying to express? What are you trying to say? Because they may convince you that having the pants down makes some sense, and then you go to class with your pants down too. So I'm just trying to say, when something like that is so irritating to us, again, it goes back to why.
Yeah.
My
Right.
sense is when you look at this from a racial lens, that's going to be triggering a whole bunch of other things that have to do with things like incarceration and a whole bunch of other things that we're trying to say. So it's very deep that way.
Yeah.
But having a conversation with young people about clothing and what it means and what it's trying to express and how to say that, and then
Yeah.
using it as a teachable moment in terms of how that may be perceived is
Yeah.
something else, right?
Yeah. It's like, oh, you can't trying to colonize me, right? It's or whatever that is.
Or
We
whatever it
we
is.
often forget that we were young.
Yeah.
And some of you should go back and look at your pictures of what you used to look like. Woo! Now, I had a male student walk in with a T-shirt that was so offensive it took my breath away. And this T-shirt had like a woman on there who was showing her vagina. It was a black woman, a black male student.
Yep.
I couldn't stay in that presence. So I invited my student to walk with me. And I told my student, I asked my student about his mother. Does he have a mother or sisters? Does he love them? And yeah, I do. And I said, I want to tell you how your T-shirt affects me. He said, well, Professor Crumpton, what do you want me to do? I want you to just turn it inside out and never wear it again in your life. Now, I don't know if he never wore it again, but I never saw it again. So I got to get to this question for sure. And as I promised, we promised to answer all these questions. But this question for sure, I have got to get an answer to. And I want our president to take the first crack at this. And how do you suggest we can improve the diversity of our faculty and our administration?
I think the first thing that we need to do is almost go through the exercise. If you were in Frank's session yesterday where we were equitizing our guided pathways plan, we need to do that first with our strategic plan, our mission, vision, values, and goals, and make sure that equity is in each of those areas, because then we can start hiring to what our vision is, and that could happen at every level. The second thing is, and I think we're working really hard to make sure that in our search teams that someone like, and Deborah's been doing a great job in our faculty and our administrative hires of going to those search teams and providing a training on equity. And so I think that's really helpful in having a diversified search team. But as important as anything else, and it was mentioned already previously, the questions that we ask are really important. And having behavioral type questions that solicit information from the applicants of what they've actually done rather than what they think we want to hear is incredibly important, right? Because in sociology, we know that the best indicator of future behavior is past behavior, right? And some institutional biases, institutional racism that's created is if we're asking questions that are not behavioral in nature and they're answering the way we want them to, they're like us, we end up hiring them. So we need to reframe what we're doing.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I want to end this on a really positive note, because for me, this is I get up every morning and I'm enthusiastic. I'm hopeful. I'm prayerful. I'm believing that every single student that I see is here because they want to make more, whatever that is, right? They want to have a better life. And I recognize that I don't know who I'm looking at, right? I don't know if I'm looking at the next president, the next surgeon. I don't know who I'm looking at. So, but everybody doesn't come to work joyful. I can tell because some of these people look constipated when they come. You know what I'm saying? You say good morning, and they don't even see you. So I want to help spread some joy to some of these colleagues who are about to stand witness to some of the most powerful people on the planet, the students who are getting ready to arrive in less than 24 hours. So please tell these folks what brings you joy in this work. What in your work brings you joy?
I'm going to answer that. Because if you know me, you know I'm probably one of the most positive people you'll see. And I often get the question, my students coin me Dr. G. They're like, how can you be so positive when you deal every day with microaggressions and bias and all of that? And I said, because I remember whose shoulders I'm on. And if you really think about it, I should not be on this stage right now. Yep. And the fact that I am is due to the fact that there were people, African people, who, despite the fact that they were trying to be erased from the planet, and here on the land that I stand, envisioned me sitting here, knowing that they would never see that come to pass. And yet and still, they got up and they sowed the seeds for a time that they knew was here, that wasn't out there. and knew that it would come to pass, and they didn't allow it to stop them. And despite everything else, they kept going and they kept going and they kept going. And so I know when I'm doing my work, I'm continuing that process. And oftentimes, especially to the choir, it can seem like you're getting frustrated and so forth. You have to remember, you may not see the outcome of what it is that you are envisioning, but it too will come to pass. And when you know that, and you are on a legacy like the one that I am on, how could you not be joyful? And then when you see those lovely students who come and they look at you and you realize you are in partnership with them to create that world and they're part of that as well, that they're going to continue that as well, that joy, you hear, it's like, how do you not just feel so incredibly honored and blessed every single day?
Thank you. Yeah. So, in the remaining 30 seconds, does anybody have anything that they need to build on with that they can offer to this audience to get their joy back? Like, we might want to tell people, stop hanging around with folks who ain't joyful. Hello? Some of your colleagues, some of y'all are just infecting each other, each other.
Just walk away from that.
I tell my students,
walk away from that.
people only do two things to you. They either contribute to you or they contaminate you. You ought to ask yourself if you're in the contamination choir or the contribute. I'm just saying. Life really is really simple. We just make it all complicated, all kind of stuff. But anybody got anything else in the last 30 seconds?
Just really quickly, I think for many of us, this is a way of life. This is our spirit, and this is our social justice work. It's not separated. And as building on what was shared, as my grandmother elders shared with me, this is for that seventh generation to come, and that's what offers joy, that it will be for that seventh generation to make the changes that are necessary.
Anybody else?
Yes. 3 words: thankful, grateful, and blessed. I'm thankful because my students have moved from calling me Professor Nzinga, Miss Nzinga, to Mama Nzinga. I'm grateful because I have the opportunity to get up every morning and breathe again and breathe life into progressing the Underground Railroad. I'm blessed because how many of us get the opportunity to be in front of our students and for them every day to reflect back what we put into them?
Yeah. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome and thank, help me thank Margarita, Nzinga, Michael, Khalid, Lisa, and Lou. Now, before you go, our panelists you can either stay there or you can be seated. I promise I have 9 minutes. And I need these 9 minutes. So indulge me, please, if you will, for 9 more minutes. I promise to have you out at 11:30. I know you want to get to that box lunch. It's waiting on you. Listen, this convocation is, it's never been done before. And an event like this, I heard, I think Riyadh said yesterday as we were meeting, having a little powwow, he said, we started off planning a couple sessions, and I believe we planned a conference. And I think we have. And so this has been an incredible feat. And it has been the tireless work of so many individuals. I got to call some of them out. I got to call out. I've already called out to the chancellor and about the president. I got to call out this incredible AV IT team. Alex and Michi and all these folks. I got to say a special call out to the Staff Resource Center, Kirk and Norman and Tyler and Maggie. Oh, my goodness. You said yes to everything. And somehow or another, the 5 of us coordinators just seem to meld into working with Staff Resource Center and to one another as though we have been doing it for years. It's amazing. Thank you. I think it's because we all entered this with like-mindedness, right? What can we do for students to help everybody on this campus be more successful? To the department chairs who so graciously gave up their department meetings this afternoon so that we can have one conversation. Thank you. Thank you, department chairs. To the deans who graciously agreed to have their meeting, and the meeting is this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The division meetings is this afternoon at 3:40. Thank you for accommodating this as well. And to our president, who said, you know, we got to live our values. Oh, he is now walking his talk. Do you agree with that? I want to thank you for your courageous leadership. Thank you. Now listen. I got 7 minutes. I'm going to use all of them. This is a new normal. This moment is a moment of change. But it requires you and me, every single person, to make a conscious decision. Norman, what you doing? You're making me nervous. Okay. You know, I have students that sometimes try to do stuff like that, right? Like, you have students come in your classroom, come in late. I had to teach my students how to come late. I said, listen, I want you to pretend like this is the best movie on the planet. So if you got to pee before you come into the movie, right? You got to get your popcorn. That means you get all your stuff out the bag, and you got to ease into the movie, sit down, don't say nothing. So now they know how to come late. But first I had to get over late. This is a new normal. This is a new moment in time. You cannot unring this bell. So let me tell you what I mean by that. Some of you will go out and say, I ain't hear a damn thing new. You know, it's the same old, same old. You would be lying. You would be delusional. I can't let you leave like that because the stakes are just too damn high. You know, we're not in the business of flipping hamburgers, changing bed sheets. We don't just stock shelves in bookstores hoping somebody might come and buy it, right? We're not processing invoices because somebody just wants to go to a conference to hang out, right? We're in the business of giving people life. And so you can't clap because I got only 7 damn minutes. I can't stop for you clapping, right? 6 now. And 5, actually. We have started a new conversation. One of the faculty members said to me, yesterday, said, Deborah, this is kind of good, but I've been here like about 30 years, and everybody starts something, nobody finishes something. Well, I don't know about all of that, but I know about right now. I can tell you that I'm in it to win it. I can tell you I'm not going anywhere. I'm telling you that I'm inviting each one of you right now to use your agency, because you got it. I'm telling each one of you, you have your privilege, you need to touch the pole. You need to use your privilege. And if you are a white faculty, you got more than me. You got that? If you are white male faculty, you got more than that female white colleague sitting next to you. You need to use your privilege. You are going to be called on from this moment forward, if you're sitting in that Senate particularly, if you're the department chair, to stop whining, to get on with the business of this new normal. What is the new normal? That we are going only into the future. That we are going to learn the things that we need to learn by unlearning the stuff we need to unlearn. Yesterday I made this statement, and Dr. Forrester got a little ruffled with me. I can tell. I hope Beth is in here. I say this to students. If you believe something is true, it's true. She said, oh, Deborah, wait, what? Right? Now, I need to put it in context. So my students often say to me, like they say to you, I don't know, Professor Crumpton, I don't know. I don't have any, right? So here's what I just can't remember names. You tell me all this stuff. If you say it's true about you, it's true. And we have been given, particularly those of us who are minoritized, we've been given 1,000 lies, and they're repeated every single day. So I say to my students, listen, every time you see me, I'm going to give you the truth of who you are. There's nobody else on the planet like you. You are sacred, right? And so you're going to stop believing all those untruths. I want you all to stop believing all those untruths. And right in this moment, right now, I want everybody to make a decision. And you probably have to make the kind of decision I had to make when I was in the Army in my 17th year. My mother had died the year before that. In my past life, I was in the military. Some of you know that. And I was on this path. I was an officer. I'd gone through officer training school and all that. And I will tell you, I became an officer because I needed a good job. And I was not going back to the South Bronx. But maybe like some of you, I didn't know what I had bought into. That they really expected me to kill people because somebody thought that was right. That they expected me to give my all and include my life because of somebody else's values. And then finally one day I woke up to the organization I was in. I want to wake you up to the organization you're in. This is a community college. Its population is diverse. What does that mean? Some folks are poor. Some people are hungry. They don't trust you because people who look like you have lied to them all their lives. They don't trust authority because every time authority has come, authority has made life tougher and rougher. Everybody in education probably has lied to them, right? And so now you're asking them to trust you. You got to work for that trust. They're fearful. You think you're scared of them? Hell, they're much more afraid of you and me. Even me. I don't know why they'd be afraid of me, but even me. I got one more minute. So here's what I'm going to tell you. This is a diverse organization, and in case you signed up for an elite kind of organization, guess what? This ain't it. And so that means you have to be more. You have to do more. You have to know more. You got to come with good energy because you got to pump it into your students. So when you go home tonight, right, you got to wash all that old stuff off and say, I'm really willing. I'm willing. I don't know, but I'm willing. And if you are not willing to say that, I want to encourage you to look for another job. Okay, let me give a shout out to Juan La Chica. Did I say that right? I don't think I know Juan, but there he is. I'm told he was here before there were buildings. I'm told that Juan has been the pioneer of equity. I am told that some of you exist in this room because he existed and walked his talk. I'm also told that he's leaving this semester. We send you with our love and our blessings, and we look forward to spending the next 16 weeks with you. As you all have wristbands, and those wristbands are going to tell you where you have to. I know I'm over. Don't worry about it. Oh, every now and again I lie, but I don't mean to. So you all have wristbands. Now, and those wristbands are going to tell you where you're going this afternoon to these guided sessions. Now, I'm talking particularly to faculty. Don't not go. See, I know how some of you all are. Well, I got to get ready for my classes. Forget about it, right? This is the getting ready for your class. Getting you ready is the getting ready, right? The syllabus, that ain't the getting ready. You got to get ready. So the wristbands will tell you where you have to go this afternoon. When you walk into Rada North and go to Rada North first, there are posters on the wall that are color-coded to the rooms, okay? And so please be seated in your room by 1:15 so the sessions can properly start at 1:30. We may have to do a little bit of shifting around and make sure the rooms are properly populated, okay? So as you are transitioning from the old you to the new normal, please enjoy the music of the Element Brass Band. I'll see you all later on this afternoon. Bless you all.
Thank you.